Welcome to Mystery Date, where we dive into the weird, the wild, and the downright puzzling. While our podcast is primarily for entertainment with plenty of laughs along the way, we occasionally discuss serious and sensitive topics. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners, so discretion is advised.
Have you ever heard of a mystery so peculiar it transcends time and baffles historians even today? Picture this: two children with skin as green as the lushest forest, wandering out of an ancient wolf pit near a medieval English village. They speak no known language, eat only raw beans, and claim to hail from a twilight land. Are they mere folklore, wanderers from another world, or visitors from beneath our feet? Join us as we unravel the centuries-old enigma of the Green Children of Woolpit.
I'm Christian.
I'm Kate. Welcome to Mystery Date.
It's date night, meaning we get to talk about all things mysterious and weird.
This season is called Into the Woods, and it involves mysteries surrounding forests, jungles, and woods all around our world.
Tonight's mystery is the Green Children of Woolpit.
Get comfy, grab your favorite drink, and let's start the show.
All right, just a little disclaimer before we start. This is the second time we've had to record this due to camera issues, but we're back to the way we were, so I hope everything's nice and clean and looks good. And we're going to redo this episode. So if anything seems a little weird or seems a little odd in the way that we're talking about it, that's why. So just a heads up. So diving into it, tonight's mystery takes us all the way back to 12th century England. It all centers around a small village called Woolpit. Now, Woolpit is located in Suffolk County in England, and that's midway between the towns of Edmonds and Stowmarket. Now, again, I've not been there. Wikipedia and Google assures me that this place exists.
Yeah, I haven't been to either of those places either. I have been to England, but only once. I was pretty young, and we really only spent time in London, so it's about as far as my knowledge goes.
Yeah, I've definitely never been to Europe. I just recently left the United States for the first time in December, and that was just to the Bahamas, so it wasn't far. The village of Woolpit dates back to the 10th century, where its name was first recorded as Woolpit, or it would later be known as Woolpetta. And this is derived from an Old English word that basically meant pit for trapping wolves. So easy enough.
All right.
Seemingly a common theme on this show so far, but it's just funny how simple human naming conventions were/are. I mean, at the same time, though, we look at it and it's kind of genius how these things have evolved over time to what we know is today.
I mean, yeah, humans are always simple at the core, especially when you look at naming conventions. Like, oh, what's that town over there? That's that place that they pit wolves. You know, like, that's how things go, though. It's what's that place over there? It's the place that they pit wolves. Oh, okay, wolf pit, got it. And then different languages and different accents and language barriers create different versions of it over time. You've got wolf pit, wolfpetta, it's like, okay, yeah, I see.
I mean, yeah, again, it's just funny how, like, we keep running into this in all of our stories where the name, you can follow it back to where, oh, it's actually a very simple way where they got there. And then it kind of brings insight into the local towns maybe around you where it's like, when you start thinking about the names, you're like, I wonder if that's where that derived from. And it probably is.
Yeah.
Moving on. While the exact dates of our mystery remain a highly debated subject, most researchers and retellers of this tale place it during the reign of King Stephen. So that would be sometime between 1135 AD and 1154 AD. That's just to place a little bit of where we're at. Again, it goes back and forth on what actual historians say the true date was, but this is the generally accepted time period. In order to properly explain this mystery, I have to first start by telling you about two writers. And they were pretty active around this time, and this was Ralph of Coggeshall and William of Newburgh. These two were both heavily involved in the Catholic religion and held pretty prestigious titles within Catholic organizations in their region. Ralph was an abbot of the Cistercian Cogshale Abbey at Cogshale, which was a town around 26 miles away from Woolpit. And an abbot, by the way, is the head of an abbey of monks. So he was basically the head of a religious order of Catholic monks.
I didn't know there were Catholic monks.
I didn't really realize that either. I didn't look too much more into them besides just what an abbot was and a little bit about this thing at Cogshale. But yeah, interesting little tidbit. William, on the other hand, was a canon at the Augustinian Newburgh Priory. And this was far north in Yorkshire, England, so this was pretty far away from Woolpit or Suffolk County or any of that. And a canon at the time was a Christian title, pretty much akin to a cleric. So again, these two had quite the background and held these prestigious titles within their orders. So it's not like we're talking about two random guys at this time period who just wrote some bullshit or something like that.
Yeah, well, and I will say, being religious men as well, they probably weren't likely to just write up random tales or gossip that they heard or be writing just like, say, fiction for the heck of it. They were probably mostly writing things like scholarly, academic, religious, nonfiction type of works. Or at least in their eyes, nonfiction. You can get into a debate about religion on your own, but that's where I stand on this topic. Like, they're not guys who are over here writing random stories just for fun. They're probably documenting more serious, real matters.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason I mentioned both of these two men, kind of like you said, they were known to write these serious matters, but decades apart, they wrote a detailed account of what we're about to talk about. The story of the Green Children of Woolpit was documented in two different works of writing. And this was the Historian Rerum Angelicarum. I hope I said that somewhat right. And that's basically the history of English affairs, and that was written in 1189 by William of Newburgh. And there is also the Chronicum Anglicanum, which was the English chronicle, written in 1220 by Ralph of Cogshale. Both of these works were more or less a collection of historical accounts from around England at the time. And from what I could find, this was a pretty popular thing for a lot of these local churches to do, just keep a record almost, or a chronicle detailing all of the events that the church experienced or the nearby towns experienced.
I mean, that makes sense. People still do that today. They just call it a newsletter.
Essentially, yeah, that's what it was, just through the churches.
It's like, here's the local activities and the happenings and the goings on, and here's some pictures of happy children enjoying it.
So before we tell you the story of the Green Children of Woolpit, I just want to recap. This story has been recounted and recorded by two different prestigious religious men in their books documenting history. So again, these were written in books that were chronicling events and history at the time these men were alive. It's not like they were written in any fictional story tale or folklore collection that was found. With that in mind, let's hear William of Newburgh's retelling of the Green Children of Woolpit. And disclaimer, this is a translation of William's writings done by Joseph Stevenson in 1856. So some things might be a little different. It might not be a straight one for one. Just a heads up.
But I'm sure it'll be better than hearing the original Old English version that we probably wouldn't understand what the heck he was saying.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't even know if it was Old English or what the hell they were writing in. I was trying to look up the name of those books and stuff, but it definitely was something that we would not be able to understand, so it was translated.
Here we go.
All right, so this is William of Newburgh's story. Nor does it seem right to pass over an unheard of prodigy, which, as is well known, took place in England during the reign of King Stephen. Though it is asserted by many, yet I have long been in doubt concerning the matter, and deemed it ridiculous to give credit to a circumstance supported by no rational foundation, or at least one of a very mysterious character. Yet, at length I was so overwhelmed by the weight of so many and such competent witnesses, that I have been compelled to believe and wonder over a matter, which I was unable to comprehend or unravel by any powers of intellect. In East Anglia, there is a village, distant as it is said 4 or 5 miles from the noble monastery of the blessed king and martyr Edmund. Near this place are seen some very ancient cavities called wolf pits. That is, in English, pit for wolves, and which gives their name to the adjacent village Woolpit or market town. During the harvest, while the reapers were employed in gathering the produce of the fields, 2 children, a boy and a girl, completely green in their persons, and clad in garments of a strange color and unknown materials, emerged from these excavations. While wandering through the fields in astonishment, they were seized by the reapers and conducted to the village, and many persons coming to see such a novel sight, they were kept some days without food. But when they were nearly exhausted with hunger, and yet could relish no species of support which was offered to them, it happened that some beans were brought in from the field, which they immediately seized with avidity, and examined the stalk for a pulse, but not finding it in the hollow stalk, they wept bitterly. Upon this, one of the bystanders, taking the bean from the pod, offered them to the children, who seized them directly and ate them with pleasure. By this food they were supported for many months, until they learned the use of bread. At length, by degrees, they changed their original color through the natural effect of our food, and became like ourselves, and also learned our language. It seemed fitting to certain discreet persons that they should receive the sacrament of baptism, which was administered accordingly. The boy, who appeared to be the younger, surviving the baptism but a little time, died prematurely. His sister, however, continued in good health, and differed not in the least from the women of our country. Afterwards, as it is reported, she married at Lynn, and was living a few years since, at least so they say. Moreover, after they had acquired our language, on being asked who and whence they were, they are said to have replied, "We are inhabitants of the land of Saint Martin, who is regarded with peculiar veneration in the country which gave us birth." Being further asked where the land was and how they came thence hither, they answered, "We are ignorant of both those circumstances. We only remember this, that on a certain day when we were feeding our father's flocks in the field, we heard a great sound, such as we are now accustomed to hearing at St. Edmund's when the bells are chiming. And whilst listening to the sound in admiration, we became on a sudden, as it were, entranced, and found ourselves among you in the fields where you were reaping." Being questioned whether in that land they believed in Christ or whether the sun arose, they replied that the country was Christian and possessed churches. But said they, "The sun does not rise upon our countrymen, our land is little cheered by its beams. We are contented with that twilight, which, among you, precedes the sunrise or follows the sunset. Moreover, a certain luminous country is seen, not far distant from ours, and divided from it by a very considerable river. These and many other matters, too numerous to particularize, they are said to have recounted to curious inquirers. Let everyone say as he pleases, and reason on such matters accordingly to his abilities. I feel no regret at having recorded on an event so prodigious and miraculous."
I love how he starts it out by saying he was doubtful at first. He's like, I heard these tales about these green children and I was doubtful. I thought, okay, all of my intellect and logic and faith is telling me this is BS. But there were so many accounts of it, so many believable, credible people telling him that this happened, that he was inclined to believe it must be true. And he recorded it in this historical context. And I love that he then circles back to that at the end and he says, I have no remorse for having recorded this, because he's like, trust me, like, I know what it sounds like, but I believe it now. And here's what happened.
It's crazy. Yeah, he basically battles with himself inside his own writing where he's like, I don't even know if I wanted to include this, but against all odds, the facts are telling me that this did happen, so I'm going to write it down and I won't feel like a fool doing it.
Yeah.
So now that we've heard the story and have a small understanding of what we're dealing with, we can dive into what actually happened. Was this an actual thing that happened, or was this just a tall tale written down and maybe misinterpreted? Before we move on, I do have to mention, this is just William of Newburgh's retelling of the story. Like we said earlier, Ralph of Coggeshall also wrote about this event, and you can find that story online if you want, but we're not going to read that one here. We decided to only include William's version for time's sake, and because the stories are very similar. There are some differences, which we'll get into in a little bit, but more or less they tell the same tale. So what actually happened? Well, when it comes to this story, neither Ralph or William gave a solid explanation for this event, and still today it seems to baffle researchers and historians alike. Like the story says, 2 children, a boy and a girl, were discovered in the early 12th century near the town of Woolpit. The 2 children immediately drew the attention of those working in the fields that day they arrived, and they were taken to be examined by those in the town. After some time, it was discovered that the 2 children only seemed to eat a sort of pea that grew in the nearby farms. Since the children didn't speak any known language, communication took quite some time, but eventually the children were convinced to eat more normal foods like bread. Sometime later, the children would be baptized. The boy, who was younger, he grew ill and eventually died.
Demon child.
I mean, they must have thought something from that. I can't imagine.
I mean, I don't believe that, but he died after being baptized?
Now, and you could argue maybe it wasn't necessarily the baptism. He did change his diet. He was in an unfamiliar land. He could have gotten sick by something. Like, there's so many possibilities. We're not blaming it on the baptism, but it is strange and a thing to note that
It's just an eerie coincidence.
the girl, however, lived on and eventually learned to communicate with those who found her. She even married and assumingly lived a full life. Those who found them when they could finally communicate sadly wouldn't really clear up any of those questions. They said they came from a land known as St. Martin's Land, and they described a kind of parallel world that has pretty significant differences from ours, such as the lack of sunlight, the apparently loud noises that summon them to different worlds, because they said they heard a loud bell-like sound before they were brought into the fields at Woolpit, so...
Yeah, and they thought it was coming from their church at first, but...
I think they were comparing it to the church that they hear now. Because Edmonds was a nearby town to
Okay,
Woolpit, so I think they were just saying it was familiar to the church bells that we hear at Edmonds. That's pretty much all we know about the children of Woolpit. Since this was just recorded in basically history books, there isn't really any more information on the children or where the living girl ended up. I tried to look into that to see if there's any documents of her life after this event, but there really isn't.
Yeah, and I mean, at that time, unless she had married into royalty or some other prestigious title, she probably wouldn't have been documented more about, because who was going to write a biography about random people? Even if there's something strange and interesting about them, that's not what was happening at the time. They were still exploring parts of the world.
And that was her past. She wasn't green anymore.
Exactly. So people might not have even believed it was ever real at that point. Like, people aren't looking into that. It's not like today where you have everybody sleuthing around online and going down these deep dives on this history.
Sorry for the free feet. If you see them, they might get cropped out. One more thing I wanted to bring up in this story is the small difference with Ralph's story when compared to William's. Now, William never said who his sources for this story was, but Ralph, on the other hand, he claimed to have been told the story by a man who actually housed the Green Children and claimed to know them. Richard de Calne was a man who supposedly sheltered the children in his manor house outside the village, and this man would be known as the source that Ralph used to write his story, but many also claim that he was probably the source for William as well. Which that would make sense. If their stories are very similar and what they're talking about is very similar, they probably had, a similar source.
That's true. And I mean, they were from different generations, but they weren't from like hundreds of years apart. They were only like 30 or 40 years apart.
Yeah, the stories
in their publications.
like about 40 years.
Yeah, so they probably were 1 or 2 generations apart in age, but there's very good possibility that this man that they talked to, he was young, and it had recently happened when he talked to the first guy. And then when he talked to the second guy, he was an old man, and it was talking about his past and not something that had just happened.
Yeah. So I'm definitely in that camp. I could
Buy
see
it.
them sharing the same source.
I buy it.
And that was the main difference that I wanted to bring up between William and Ralph's story, is that Ralph just basically cites Richard de Calne in his story, saying, this is where I got this information.
He said, don't come at me.
Yeah, don't come at me, come at this man.
If I get proven wrong about this and it doesn't belong in this history text, it's this guy's fault, not mine.
So now we're going to get into theories. What's the deal with these green children?
What's the deal with the green children?
What theories have people concocted when trying to solve this mystery?
My maiden name is Green, and I have a brother, so I'm sure that that's what people were saying to my parents all the time.
Those damn green children.
What's the deal with those green children?
Maybe that's the answer to the story. Their last name was just Green, and some things got miscommunicated.
Yeah, that would be hilarious.
There are many, many theories that can be discussed when bringing up this mystery, but we're going to start with a simple one, and that's folklore. This first theory claims that the story is simply folklore. I know this isn't as mysterious or fun, but it is what most historians do generally accept as the answer to this.
Which is fair. I mean, it's not folklore-y.
Oh, 100%. You could easily compare it to a story you'd read as a kid.
Oh,
Or-
yeah.
Find in like a Brothers Grimm book or something like
Yeah,
that.
like a short story fairy tale.
Yeah.
It fits, you know? Fair assessment, but not so fun. Let's move on.
Well, no, we got more here. I know it's not that fun, but let's dive into it a little bit. Historians think that this is basically something fabricated by the writers of the time and possibly even taken by William and Ralph as fact, as like a misheard story. So like we said, not necessarily with the green children with the last name, but this could be a miscount or a mishearing of something that they were told and they wrote it down.
Okay, and that's why in their positions and roles, they still took it as fact. They didn't think they were writing folklore, but it still could have been. And maybe lost in translation, they were being told folklore and they thought this really happened. Oh
this
my
is-
gosh.
Yeah, real thing. Holy crap, I gotta record this.
They were just gullible. They didn't know any better.
I mean, in reality, Ralph and William themselves could have made it up as well. Like I said, they were religious scholars and writers and mostly wrote chronicles or historical records detailing the events of their time, but most writers dive into other genres or do other sorts of work, at least to work out the brain and keep that muscle in use. So
I love the idea that this like pastor of the church and leader of the Catholic monks is like, they're writing their documents, writing their sermons, documenting the activities of the town and the church's festivities. And one day they're like, God, I just really want to write a sci-fi fantasy so bad. I'm going to do it. I'm just going to write a quick little fantasy story. And it's going to be so cute about some little green kids. There we go. Oh, and I'll even add baptism in there. There we go, church. Ha ha ha. And then somebody catches him and he's like flipping the page. No, I'm still writing the important history book, see? And he just slipped it in there.
and he just slipped it in there.
It just-
Wha- I think it's pretty dark that he was like, haha, then they get baptized. And then, you know what? Kill the boy. That's pretty fucked up.
I told you, demon child.
I mean, you got to have some sort of tension in the story. There is a little bit of validity to this story, though, and this theory when you dive into it a little bit more. So, some scholars of English folklore claim that this story shares a lot of similarities with other stories written at the time, and the most commonly compared work is that of Gerald of Wales. And he tells a story of a boy who encountered two pygmies who led him through an underground passage into a beautiful land with fields and rivers, but it was not lit by the full light of the sun. While this tale is somewhat similar, a lot of researchers do say that the connection is rather thin and doesn't go beyond the general description of where the children came from. And I can kind of see that. The story does more or less touch on the Hollow Earth, which we'll talk about in a second.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The only comparison there really is the setting, you know, the world they came from, the Twilight Land. But it is almost a word for word same description of that land.
I mean, yes.
They talked about the farming, they talked about a river separating the worlds, they talked about it being in Twilight. So that tracks, but the rest of it is not really that similar.
Yeah, there's not that much more compared to the Green Children there. Moving on. Outside of the work of Gerald of Wales, there are other works that some say relate or draw from the story of the Green Children. A scholar by the name of Martin Walsh says the story is just a garbled account of an atavistic harvest ritual. Now, I did a little bit of deep diving into some other subjects here because this gets a little interesting. Walsh claims that the story is just a poor game of telephone, basically butchering an ancient story relating to the Feast of Martimas, which is a feasting holiday of St. Martin, and it's typically celebrated around November 11th.
Huh.
This is also historically called Old Halloween or All Hallows Eve, which I had no idea about this Martimas or relation to Halloween in the Catholic religion, apparently. So I think that's pretty interesting.
That's really interesting. I've never heard of Martimas or St. Martin's Day or whatever. And I have heard of All Hallows Eve, but I was always kind of told or thought, I don't know where I got this information. I was young when I learned it, so I couldn't tell you my sources, but I always thought All Hallows Eve was just the old name for today's Halloween. And I thought it was still October 31st. I had no idea it was on November 11th.
Yeah, I didn't dive too much into like the actual holiday itself, just because that's not necessarily what this episode was about. But it does seem to be just essentially a Thanksgiving kind of blend between that and Halloween. There wasn't any trick-or-treating or any of those festivities like that. It was more or less a feasting holiday. So what you'd imagine Thanksgiving to be here in America, where you gather, you eat, you reap the harvest that you spent the year working for.
And you give thanks to whatever deity you've chosen to give thanks to that month.
Exactly. And basically he's saying that this story is more or less just a tale relating to that ritual. It's not anything beyond that. And we can see how he draws those conclusions as the mention of St. Martin is recounted in the tale of William of Newburgh, and that does spark a little bit of interest. Something else to mention here is that some say that the beans in the story signify death. And this is something I didn't know, but beans are often associated with the dead in many cultures around the world. There isn't too much there, but it's just something to note.
Beans?
Yeah, I guess beans, I don't know if it's like a funeral ritual, a burial ritual, where the beans place into the death, but someone dies and they bring the beans out.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
I don't mean to like shit on anyone's culture. I'm not trying to downplay it. I had no idea.
I've never heard of that. And to me, I have always viewed beans as like something cute. Like,
I mean, yeah.
like they're little cute little beans. Like I call my dog Beans. Like, I don't know. I never would have thought that beans were associated with death. That's why it's funny to me. I don't think it's funny that people do that. It's like,
no, it's, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was such a shock. It was funny.
Yes. But yeah, so
interesting.
With the All Hallows Eve, and again, that does have a sort of, that Martimas does have a relation to respecting the dead. So with the beans, with St. Martin being mentioned, some of this Martin Walsh guy is saying that, no, this is just a bad game of telephone of this story of Martimas.
Huh. But where do the Green Children fall into play of that? I mean, yeah, they said St. Martin's Land and they ate beans. And maybe that's, we've got Martin Moss and All Hallows Eve with death. Those two coincidences, but I feel like the rest of the story is still kind of weak.
Well, you got to think like Santa Claus and Christmas. That's a story that is not at all related to the holiday, but it's not necessarily taken as fact. But it's a large connection to people who celebrate Christmas. They also celebrate Santa.
That's true. Okay.
I think that's the kind of tale that he's saying it's a bad game of telephone of. Is he's like, you took this necessarily Santa-like figure or these two green children that were related to the feast and the coming of the harvest, and you took it as fact and wrote it down as a historical record. I think that's kind of what he's getting at.
That makes more sense.
Yeah. So I guess the Green Children are the Santa to Halloween. So this Halloween,
Dye your skin green.
Dye your skin green.
But not as Elphaba. There'll be plenty of those already this year.
Yeah, no, when people ask, are you Elphaba? You'll be like, no.
No, I'm from Woolpit.
I am the Green Children.
Do you have any beans, sir? Trick or treat. Candy, I wanted green beans.
I wonder how they would have taken other beans, like pinto beans.
Yeah.
Because it was a type of
beans.
green bean that they were eating, not necessarily the green
Right,
we have
like
today. But yeah.
green bean, like lime bean.
Yes, yeah.
Probably like
I wonder how they would have done with other beans.
edamame. That's a fun word.
It is.
Edamame.
It seems pretentious for the kids to be walking up and being like, no, we only eat edamame. I don't know why. I know it's just like a pea, but it sounds very pretentious.
Does make them sound bougie. Bread, stew, edamame. Only.
They're like, dude, we
It
can't even.
goes with my skin.
I only eat foods that match my skin color.
That's probably why they were green.
I mean, yeah, probably eating too many damn beans, and we'll get into that.
Yeah.
So, moving on from the boring theory of folklore, we're going to get onto some fun stuff, which is, you got to mention it in these stories. Aliens. Yeah, you got it.
Do it.
Another theory that is commonly discussed in this story is that these children, well, they were simply aliens. Either,
Simply.
yeah,
Of
simply,
course.
just they were simply aliens.
They were simply aliens.
Either they crash landed on Earth a while ago and had been living here inside of our Earth, or they have just been living beneath our surface forever, and they're a different breed of humans that have been separated from us for however long.
Ooh, so instead of an extraterrestrial alien, you have an earthly alien.
Yes, yes. Now, I know this might sound crazy, but when you hear this story, these children don't sound human. If you take out the theory that this might all be made up or simply folklore, which you have to remember, these were two prestigious men that were writing in religious history books, essentially. They weren't known to write fiction works. I mentioned it earlier that they might have dabbled, but none of their fiction works are what they're known for. The books that recount this event are often historical records or chronicles simply detailing events at the time they were written. So, did this actually happen? And if it did, would it be that far-fetched to say that these children were aliens or some other human-type creature? And kind of like you mentioned, this is where it gets a little fun. Now, the children do mention that they come from basically an underground world that is graced by not just the light of the sun, but also something else. I mean, something has to be lighting it intermittently between the twilight, or are they even really seeing the sun? Is that some other sort of light source or heat source that's providing them artificial sunlight? Everyone always assumes that aliens must come from outer space, but what if they come from inside of our world? What if these aliens have been living on Earth for decades or centuries without us even knowing, again, beneath our very feet in massive caverns that are known to exist, and scientists all around the world know that there are massive pits inside of our crust that just harbor open areas. What if inside those open areas there's fields, rivers? Maybe they're using, I kind of hinted at it before, the radiation of the core of the Earth is their sunlight, and that's what graces them with intermittent periods of light.
I've seen Doctor Who. I remember the green people living inside the Earth.
Exactly.
There's a whole episode about it. There's several episodes about it, actually. They come back again and again.
Or if you've seen Godzilla, they talk about the Hollow Earth in that when they go inside and it's a huge green landscape with all of those monsters. What if that's where these green children came from? A place like that. And they just wandered out one day. Maybe something bad was happening to their civilization. Maybe that's what that loud boom they heard was, and they were assisted outside of wherever they were living and sent to our world.
I could buy it. That's a fun theory, but even saying that there's no way any part of this could be fiction, it's definitely a real story. that does not make my mind immediately go, oh, well, then they couldn't have been human or they couldn't have been normal humans. I think there are plenty of reasonable explanations for why they were green, why they only ate certain things, why they said what they said about where they came from. I think there's perfectly scientific, factual, legitimate reasons that those could have been.
Okay.
So, as much as I'm like, hell yeah, green people inside Hollow Earth, I don't know about that.
Well, that's my personal favorite theory so far, but we'll get into it a little bit more with some theories that I think you might like now. Some more down to earth theories. Moving on to our last theory or group of theories. These are more modern and grounded, and they have been kind of thrown around for many years now.
For many moons.
Many moons. A man named Paul Harris suggested in a literary journal named Fortean Studies 4 that the Green Children were most likely Flemish orphans. And Flemish, by the way, is a West Germanic language spoken by the Flemings, an ethnic group in Belgium. I did not know that.
Yeah, I've never heard of Flemish,
Nope.
Fleming. I never heard of any of that.
So it's good to learn.
Yeah, hopefully it's not derogatory term.
No, it's not. It's a language, and
Okay.
the people that speak the language, I believe, are just known as Flemings.
Okay.
Paul Harris claimed that these orphan children came from a nearby place known as Fornham St. Martin. Now that already raised my eyebrow, because there's a place named St. Martin somewhat nearby. Fornham St. Martin was separated from Woolpit by the Lark River. Harris said that a lot of Flemish immigrants have arrived in the 12th century in this area of England, but they were prosecuted under the reign of King Henry II. In the year 1173, many of these immigrants were killed near Bury St. Edmunds, and this was just another nearby town where I mentioned that's where the kids said that sound reminded them of the bell from St. Edmunds. That's that town. Harris goes on to claim that the children probably fled from being killed and may have entered one of the countless copper mines found in the area. When they finally arrived at the Woolpit, they may have seemed almost alien-like to this secluded English town. The copper could have also changed the children's skin to a green hue that could have been exaggerated through these stories. And Harris himself blames the green skin on hypochromic anemia, which is also known as chlorosis, or apparently green sickness. When I looked into what chlorosis is, it seems to be a historical term that described iron deficiency anemia. And this can lead to a shallow green facial complexion, hence the name green sickness.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So much in there to unpack. First of all, they're from St. Martin's what's-his-face farmer's town next door to the place they ended up in that's separated by what? A large river, just like they said. The copper turns things green. Every girl who wears jewelry for long periods of time knows that it'll turn your skin green, especially if it's like wet or, you're sweaty or something. I mean, if these kids are escaping a slight war zone or at least a minor attack, maybe their family is being prosecuted or hunted down by this royal, whatever. They're fleeing, like they don't speak the language. Because they don't speak the language, perhaps they never said, "No, the sun does not grace our land. We live in twilight all the time." Maybe they said something else, and it just got translated wrong by the time they learned to speak English. Like, there's so many, and especially the green sickness with iron deficiency. I mean, think about the phrase, like, you look green when somebody looks sick. When was the last time you actually saw somebody look green when they were sick? But like the sick emoji, it's green. Sick cartoons, they turn green. Like that's always been kind of a thing to like represent sickness with turning green. Even though in modern times, like I don't see that. Maybe if you're a medical professional working in like an ICU or an ER somewhere, then you've seen it, but I feel like the average person has not actually seen somebody turn green with sickness. So that's really interesting that it used to just be like a type of iron deficiency.
Yeah, I knew
And
nothing about that. I had to look into what chlorosis was.
going through a copper mine, only eating green foods, and you're deficient in iron. Of course, your skin looks green. And of course, when the story is being told, that's going to get exaggerated. Who doesn't exaggerate a story for dramatic effect?
Well, in the fact that in that
Even
story,
if it's a factual story, like people embellish all the time, or they just say it so dramatically that it sounds like more than it is.
and even in that story, though, the information that they exaggerate is unfortunately enough to where it's almost not vilifying, but outcasting these children, being like, they are weird. They're not like us. They don't speak our language. They obviously need to be studied and forced to convert to whatever. Like, they're treating them like these true aliens, which at the time in this area of England, they clearly were not accepting of these people.
Yeah, essentially, what you have happening here is people are emigrating for safety, and the royals in the new area are super racist, and they're like, nope, you're not like us. We're gonna either kill you all or treat you like some alien that needs to be, like Christian said, studied and converted to our ways as soon as possible. Pretty reasonable explanation for the story right there.
I mean, yes, I figured you'd like this part.
I mean, it's a horrible explanation because
Well, yeah,
people suck. Like, why do you have to be so racist and violent? But whatever. Like that.
But it's a good answer.
That's a good, that makes the mystery of it all make perfect sense.
And while this is the most widely accepted and grounded and give it scientific theory, many also contribute this story to kind of what we were hinting at the time, which is racism towards Flemish immigrants. Like what was stated earlier, that might just be a completely made up story, or it could have ties to actual immigrants who immigrated, and this was kind of almost humorous or parody of those people coming to their town of Woolpit. I buried the lead a little bit till now, but Ralph and William, the original writers of this story, while being prestigious men, they did from time to time write fictitious tales, and a lot of scholars and historians attribute this to back up the theory that this was just in fact a made-up story.
Wait, it's factually proven that they did also write fiction?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, they do have fiction works.
My original fanfic theory of the pastor in the office, like, hee, I'm gonna write fantasy. Don't worry, I'll make it relevant to church somehow. Ha ha ha.
He just wanted to get his book published. He was trying to write his stuff on the side, and they needed him to focus on the history stuff, so he just tried to blend the two. You can't blame the man.
You know, as a writer, I support it. You sneak that fantasy into your religious texts, my boy.
So that's all of the theories that I felt like bringing up or felt were the most relevant to the mystery to help us solve or come to our conclusions, which we're going to get into now. So did the Green Children ever actually exist? This story has been told and retold for centuries, with a lot of other details being thrown in to add flavor to this already mesmerizing tale. What we told you tonight is, like always, just the tip of the iceberg. I think we've covered enough, though, to come to our own personal conclusions, and I think I know mine. So let's talk about it. Did this actually happen, or was it simply a tall tale written down by religious scholars?
After you, my love.
I think if we take out the whole folklore aspect, which I was hinting to before in my alien theory, I believe that it's aliens. I love the theory that these people beneath our Earth came up and for some reason, whether or not they were fleeing from trouble or just searching for resources or merely got lost, they found a different world in ours, and they met our people, and we tried to communicate to them, but we never really quite figured it out because they were young. So by the time they grew up, or this girl lived a life and got married, she couldn't still remember or recall these certain events and more or less gave up that past life. But I don't know why my brain is telling me this is folklore and this is pretty much the Flemish theory or the Fleming theory. But my heart wants me to go with the aliens in our Earth theory. So
Hollow Earth.
Yeah, I'm going with the Hollow Earth one. That's where I'm landing on. And we will cover the Hollow Earth at one point as an episode, so keep your eye out on.
I agree that I really like and am intrigued by the Hollow Earth alien theory. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, Doctor Who incorporates that theory into its stories. You mentioned Godzilla and the, like, Kong movies. I'm sure there's other movies and plenty of books out there that go into different Hollow Earth
Journey of the
theories.
Center of the Earth.
Yeah, I mean that was the first one we all saw as kids.
Journey of the Center of the Earth.
Journey to
the Center of the Earth. The second one should have been called Journey of the Center of the Earth.
Was it called Journey Back to the Center of the Earth? I don't
know.
remember the second one.
I don't think there was ever an actual second book, but they made a second movie.
Well, of course they did. The first one did well.
Yeah, and I can't remember. I think it was just called Journey to the Center of the Earth too.
You know how Hollywood feels about sequels.
It's all about the sequels.
If there's an opportunity to make a sequel, they are going to make a sequel.
Yep, that's why we got 2 Wicked movies, which I'm not complaining. I love Wicked and I'll take it. I'm going to absorb all of that, but
they break everything into 2 movies if they can. Or they just keep making more afterward. Or 10 years after it came out, they're like, let's reboot it.
Yep, let's get it going.
Yeah, it's been 30 seconds. Let's do it again.
So where are you laying?
So I like that theory. I would love to write some fiction about these green children in a simplistic, less Hollywood cinematic version of a Hollow Earth ending up in our world. What I believe is that I do believe that it's very possible this tale could technically be factual, where children that were green in color and only ate vegetables appeared and didn't speak the language and kind of assimilated into this new culture, eventually lost their green color, yada, yada, yada. That all tracks because, like I said, and like some of the theories delved into, there are reasonable explanations for those things. It was a couple hundred years ago. Even today, there are plenty of language barriers. Like, I don't speak every language on the planet. I don't know about you, but if you went somewhere that wasn't your home and somebody was speaking a different language, you'd probably be confused, and they'd probably be confused if they didn't understand your language. So a few hundred years ago, before things like technology existed, that language barrier could have been taken as dramatically as these must be from another world. Also, you have things like immigration happening and wars happening and racist movements happening. So that all makes sense that, okay, somebody who doesn't speak the language is suddenly in this area and unfamiliar with their surroundings. They're kids without parents. Well, if there's a war or some shit going on, maybe they lost their parents. That all tracks. Their skin could be green because they're used to eating only vegetation, whether they grew up on a farm and they were kind of poor, so they really only had their crops. Or maybe they've been living on the streets in the shadows of this battle or this fleeing or this migration that they're having for so long that they've just been living on whatever they can find themselves as kids walking through caves and on the side of the road. And all there is to eat is green veggies. If you only drink tomato juice or you only eat carrots, you're gonna turn red or orange or yellow. So it stands to reason that if you only eat green stuff, you might turn a little green.
Especially if you're iron deficient.
If you're iron deficient as well. I mean, that all tracks to me. So if you just look at the story from a different perspective, instead of taking it as like, oh my gosh, what are these weird green children? They only eat peas. They come from Twilight Land. Maybe it was just some miscommunications. They didn't come from Twilight Land. That girl was telling you, once she spoke English and they said, where did you come from? Do you remember your childhood? Do you remember how you and your brother got here? Maybe she said, I don't really remember the time before here, but I do remember a story my brother and I used to tell each other about a Twilight Land where the sun never rose.
There's
These people are like, yes, write that down. And
there's a
something
million
got
different
skipped. Like,
yeah, there's a million different like answers to how they came up with where they came from. Like
Yeah.
you said, if that town of the St. Martin town that's nearby Woolpit, that's separated by the Lark River, if that's where they came from, there are so many drawings. Like you said, you could pull from, oh, well, I just heard a story. Maybe that's why that little girl was talking about that, is because she's just recounting a story that her parents told her
yeah.
before they fled from being murdered. And that's kind of the only thing that's stuck with her.
And also, let's not forget, they said, does the sun shine in your land? And she said, no, we're graced with twilight. Well, if she lives in northern England somewhere, it's often very cloudy and gray and rainy and not very sunny. So, like, maybe that's what she meant.
Yeah. So you're going with this was just
I'm
a
going
bad game
with,
of telephone.
yes, I'm going with, yes, this happened, but the mystery and unexplainable things behind it, I think it is explainable.
And the boy probably died from, like we said, being sick.
Yeah,
It's not
probably
like he could get
natural
baptized and
causes.
just go,
No, I don't.
God forbid.
I don't actually blame the baptism for his death.
No.
That was just me joking. But I mean, yeah, he probably died from natural causes. Again, a few hundred years ago. We don't have modern medicine. These kids are in a foreign land without their parents, malnourished, low iron. Like, who knows what else he could have had going on medically.
Eating foreign food.
Eating foreign food for the first time, trying to adjust his diet. Maybe he had a food allergy to something he was being introduced to. Like, it could have been a billion different natural, medically speaking causes. Like, I don't think it was getting baptized. Let's just pour a drop of holy water on your forehead. Nope, he burst into flames.
Oh, he's like a demon. They pour it on and he just screeches.
Shrivels up. He turns into Voldemort and just flakes away.
And they looked at the girl and they were like, all right,
You're next. Good luck, honey. She immediately starts praying. She's like, I'm sorry I didn't believe in you before, English God.
Oh. All right. Well, that's pretty much the mystery. The only thing I want to add on here is that this story is still pretty celebrated in the town of Woolpit, whether for good or for bad. I don't know. I've never talked to a local there, but they do have some things in that town to this day that are referencing this story. So if anybody's in Suffolk County in England, please go to Woolpit.
Huh, that's interesting.
But from there, we're going to move on to the date night debrief. My question for tonight is, what are you most passionate about right now?
Most passionate about right now. I have a lot of things I'm passionate about. I'm very creative and like entrepreneurial.
It's a hard word. Don't even.
Yeah, person.
I couldn't do it.
So I do have a lot of passions, but right now specifically, I think writing has my focus. I've been outlining my new novel really consistently, and I'm got a deadline goal in mind for getting that outline done. I have a deadline goal in mind for starting and ending the first draft after that. So I am excited to keep going with that. But of course, I'm always still doing photography and I'm always still passionate about it. And I'm passionate about this podcast. This is so fun. But yeah, writing right now.
Writing? I could see that. You've been getting busy writing on that chronic book. Like I said, we got to keep her, everybody here, we'll keep tabs on it and keep her on it. For me, I'd say it's this podcast. This has taken a lot of my passion and my time lately in a good way. I've loved devoting time to it, from writing, learning how to edit, learning how to set up the camera angles, lighting, all of this stuff. Before this, I had never, let me rephrase. The first time that I really got into videography was as a kid. We all tried filming videos with our friends, but
Everyone wanted to be a YouTube star when it was like first a thing. I mean,
Exactly.
honestly, probably still now. They just, instead of YouTube, most kids are on TikTok.
no, it is.
Same shit.
The last time I checked, it's honestly terrifying. A small side tangent. In the United States, most kids want to become YouTubers. in other countries, most kids want to become still the classic, like astronauts, doctors. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Clearly, I want to become a YouTuber. It's just interesting.
That is, yeah.
But outside of making videos with my friends and doing anything like that, the first time I really got into video was with you and doing weddings. Since then, this has all been a very big learning curve. I've never done audio production or anything like that. And this entire show is produced, edited, filmed, and ran by us. So it's been a lot of learning.
It's like 99% him. I just show up.
I'll take that credit. But it's been fun, and I love every bit of it. Outside of that, I'd say I'm passionate about D&D. We've been finally getting a group together. I hope so. That'll be nice. And I've been writing a short film. If everything goes well this year, we might be able to film it, but time given and money given.
We'll get it.
Yeah.
At least the shorter one.
Yeah, exactly. But all in all, I'd say a lot of my passion has been just creating. Been fun.
Yeah.
So for free talk, the first thing I want to talk about outside of the question is our new studio. If you haven't noticed, we got a nice little poster made. We got some new lights. We got a nice back.
We shall Vanna White the studio for you.
Yeah. A nice white couch that'll get stained by our beautiful dogs as much as we love them.
No, because I'm gonna keep the door shut.
We said that on the first day they already got in here and on this.
I know. It's because they're so damn cute.
Yeah, we can't say no to them.
You seen those faces?
But this has been a really big thing, and I'm really happy about it. I think it came out very well, and it's kind of perfect for what we need. And it's nice not to have to set up and tear down a set that exists in a spot of our house that we live in and use, so we can't keep it up. But this one we can.
Yep, this is perfect. We have spent the past few weeks, maybe even a few months, I don't know. I can't comprehend time. Doing some small house projects, and this room was one of them. Did some touch-ups. It was a pretty boring blank white room before with nothing in it. And now it's our studio, and we redid our bedroom as well, and our living room. So we've been busy.
Yeah, a lot of house it's
Lots of little house touch-ups, lots of DIY.
and learning that aspect. I mean, I've never put up wallpaper or anything like that. It might not look great to you, so if you're a professional wallpaper, don't judge me.
No,
I
don't
know
judge
a lot of
us.
wallpaper people that listen to this, so just
We are broke Amazon people trying our best here.
remember when I said the show is produced, written, filmed, edited, put on solely by us? Yeah, there's nobody else. So this was put on all by us. Same with our house, though. We learned a lot about putting in flooring, ripping up baseboards. It's been fun. I mean, when you own a house, you gotta learn something at one point.
Yeah, it's been fun. Some stressful moments, some hard work, but gratifying.
Yes.
Making our house feel more like our home and adulting at its finest.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd say putting in flooring and baseboards is pretty adulting.
Sat back and said, guess I'm a dad now, even though I don't have kids.
I'm a dog dad.
I'm a dog dad now.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Well, let me see here.
Yeah, I think that's about it for free talk. I mean, yeah, we redid the studio, redid some other parts of the house, and we've been keeping busy with creating, working on your film, working on my book, doing photography sessions.
We're going to New York next month. I know we keep bringing it up, but we're super excited.
We've got a countdown.
As you just checked in on our cruise today, I forgot to mention that. That was awesome. So we're all set. We got the drink package, our hotel's booked. Again, we've never been to New York, so it's gonna be fun. And we're also going to Canada.
Yeah, and I get to spend my birthday at sea, so I'm excited for that.
Yeah, that'll be really cool. And you can expect to see some stuff on our Instagram, whether it's small videos or pictures. I'm sure you'll see some updates of our time and our little fun there. But other than that, I think that might be it for Free Talk. So thank you so much for joining us, and be sure to come back every other week for a brand new episode and a brand new mystery.
Be sure to follow us on social media at Mystery Date Podcast for updates on the show and our life. And you can email us episode ideas. Our email is mysterydatepodcast@gmail.com.
Please leave episode idea in the subject line if that's what you're sending so we can find it easily. Also, feel free to send us love letters too.
Also, be sure to share this podcast with your friends or even your enemies. We're not going to judge you. We just want you to help us get our name out there. We really appreciate it. Subscribe on YouTube as well. Comment on Spotify. Let us know your answer to our date night debrief question. What are you most passionate about? Let us know.
What
And
do you think about the Green Children?
yeah, what do you think happened?
What's your
there?
theory?
We definitely want to know that stuff. And also, if anything we ever say during these podcasts is incorrect or you know for sure that we're wrong, let us know that too. We're open to learn and we're open to change and we're open to figuring out what the actual truth is.
Yes, please always enlighten us if you have better information or more information than we do.
Just going back to it. The show is produced, edited, everything is just us. So it's a lot to keep track of. All right. So that's all. So be safe. Have a great rest of your day or night.
And remember, every good mystery deserves a date.
Bye.